The 20th century began without cars, planes, televisions, and computers, and the 1910s decade was dominated by World War I and saw the unsinkable Titanic hit an iceberg and sink, while the beginning of Prohibition was at an end of the decade. And in the ice industry that had grown in all directions for 30 years prior, the dreams of industry leaders David Brown, Harry Norvell, and John Boyle culminated in the formation of a national organization. 1917 was the year and the National Association of Ice Industries was born and merged with the Natural Ice Association. 452 were present at the first convention held in Cincinnati in 1918. The Roaring Twenties were a time of speakeasies, jazz, women getting the right to vote, the first talking film, and the first Mickey Mouse cartoon. By 1920, more plant ice was being produced than naturally harvested ice, which was collapsing into insignificance. But the 1920 convention in St. Louis, at the end of the war, brought together 1,500 attendants, both natural and artificial icemen. The ice industry was the 9th largest industry in the United States. It wanted to seek notoriety and publicity now, as ice is a necessity and demanded by all people regardless of class. It has been told that this 1920s convention brought heated discussions between the two groups, natural icemen versus artificial icemen, to the point arguments and fights broke out, as well as a ringing out of gunfire as bullets were shot into the ceiling. In 1923, a new set of constitution and bylaws was adopted. The association was now starting to issue voluntary quality certificates. In 1927, the association circulated the booklet called The Romance of Ice, explaining not only the history of ice, but how it was produced and used. It noted more than 6,000 factories supply America today with over 42 million tons of ice each year. In addition to this, the harvesters of natural ice supplied about 15,000 tons per year. The Great Depression hit the world hard in the 1930s, and the Nazis came to power in Germany, which sparked the beginning of World War II. For the association, the 13th annual convention in 1930 in Milwaukee saw the 1920s huge membership shrink 544 members to a total of 1,505. Modern refrigerators were becoming common in U.S. homes, which would forever affect the industry as was known at the time. The association wanted more money from its members to fight the progress of household refrigeration, and the Depression brought more price wars and bickering amongst icemen. It was said, "We must become salespeople as manufactured ice is no longer a monopoly with the advent of mechanical refrigeration." By 1935, the association was gaining back members as it fought for survival. And it was spoken that, in the past 17 years, we've made money beyond our fondest dreams, but with much stupidity and smug complacency. Since 1930, 1 million customers a year have been lost, and sales have declined $168 million, as sales of refrigerators were up 51%. And by the late 30s, the association forbid any block ice plant from joining the association if it installed an automatic ice maker. World War II was already underway. By the time the 1940s began, the Allies conquered Germany, and the war ended in 1945. The resulting expansion and business boom lasted decades. The 23rd Annual Convention in 1940 in New Orleans brought 35 exhibitors and 343 new members. They even sponsored the America's Handsomest Iceman contest. The national advertising program had been launched, with great sums of money spent to win back the home refrigeration market and promote new uses of ice. The association published more than 300 million ads in leading magazines and radio spots on 2,900 radio stations. By the 20th Annual Convention in 1945 in Chicago, the war was over. Many icemen who went off to fight had died in the war. The association turned its attention to researching and marketing for new uses of ice and improved ice service. Some icemen were now promoting the sale of cubes and sized ice in attractively packaged quantities. The public was increasingly viewing block ice as an old-fashioned product. So they knew that intensive selling and showmanship was going to be necessary in the post-war period. They were still trying to promote the advantages of ice block refrigerators over mechanical refrigerators. At the 1949 convention in New York City, they celebrated the 100th anniversary of ice by unveiling a portrait of John Gorey, who invented the ice machine in 1849. Over 1,400 were in attendance. Their theme was Make Money with Iceman's Ice, and it was clear now that electric refrigeration was preferred to ice and that they were wasting their time and money trying to bring it back. The association continued their 3 cents a ton charge for national advertising, which raised almost $500,000. 85% of ICE workers were unionized, which they thought was good for fair wages and a pension. 1949 was also the year the National Ice Marketing Institute was formed, whereby 134 had graduated. The 1950s are sometimes referred to as the Golden Age. Color TV was invented, Disneyland opened in California, and Elvis Presley was becoming a star. In 1953, at the annual convention in Washington, D.C., a great surprise opened the event as President Eisenhower greeted the convention. Amidst a boundless ovation, he spoke as quoted. Now, normally I don't look for an opportunity to speak in public, but my job before I went to West Point was in the ice business. A nightman who had to get those 300-pound cakes of ice out on time in the morning at the Bell Springs Creamery Company in Abilene, Kansas. My workday was 6 o'clock at night to 6 o'clock in the morning, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. So I want to tell you, I have a certain kinship with this group. The 50s brought tube ice. It took off and was soon preferred to making block and crushing it into smaller forms. Companies were starting to install semi-automatic and automatic equipment to cut labor costs, which had gone from 40 cents an hour to $2 an hour. Block ice was declining decidedly, and 34% of ice companies offered cube service, or otherwise called high-profit processed ice. The fight with the ice cube trays into home refrigerators really began, and many felt that since the association had stopped advertising, the impression of the industry would be a thing of the past. To many, the 1960s can be summed up as the Vietnam War, hippies, drugs, protests, rock and roll, and the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. The Beatles became popular, and the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. made his I Have a Dream speech. At the 44th Annual Convention in 1961 in Chicago, the battle against the on-premise ice maker begins, and the process behind a national sanitation code was born. So once again, the association members agreed to be charged 25 cents per 100 paper bags bought to raise $30,000 to $50,000 for PR. The theme would be taste-free, hard frozen, and tailoring the ads for Good Housekeeping magazine. They talked about a national symbol which was ultimately adopted in 1964, and the association now became simply the National Ice Association. In 1967, at the Golden Anniversary Convention in San Juan, Puerto Rico, 242 were in attendance, and it was a challenging time for the association. Some were afraid that the association was at risk because of a lack of participation and enthusiasm. The Ice Sales Promotion Program, using the new symbol of Chili Billy, targeting on-premise ice makers, was struggling due to funding. The association, now the NIA, was running a deficit with a limited number of members. It was down to 2,000 plants in the U.S. due to mergers and others going out of business or closing down. At this 50th convention, Chairman Gautier said, "Let us meet the future without fear and with determination to deliver our successors a still more effective National Ice Association. This convention should be the beginning of another half-century of golden opportunity to be of service to our fellow man, since our product, ice and refrigeration, is still needed and desired throughout the world. However, if we are to survive as an organization for the next 50 years, we must put more individual thought and effort in planning for the future." The Vietnam War was still a major event in the early 1970s. Disco became popular and Star Wars hit theaters. The 70s saw a huge push from marketing packaged ice to supermarkets with the introduction of the first glass door merchandisers, and the transition to plastic bags from paper bags is accomplished. The 1975 convention in New Orleans, where 734 were in attendance, was presided over by then-chairman Henry Lang. Henry, who could not be here tonight, is believed to be the youngest chairman of the association and currently most tenured. A massive national trade advertising campaign was launched to retail buyers, complete with coupons to redeem, educating them on clear-cut superiority of packaged ice from a NIA member. They estimated that all packaged ice, 45% was produced on site at the retail level. Full-page ads were launched in 10 various types of publications. The association had for many years maintained a staff of 4 to 5 in Washington, D.C. After transitioning to different management in the early 70s, the association again wanted to make a change. So in 1977, when Dick Hendler was chairman, having an outstanding convention in Dallas, Texas, he also ran the association as executive director. The 80s brought the fall of the Berlin Wall and the introduction of Rubik's Cube, the Pac-Man video game, and Michael Jackson's Thriller video. The National Ice Association became the Packaged Ice Association in 1980 to start off the decade. The Ice Industry Research Foundation was founded in 1984 by a small group of icemen. The foundation was to research new equipment and technology appropriate to the industry, and in a few years it led to the Baylor bag packaging machine. The PIA had a strong core membership base during the 80s, and fun convention tales such as Chairman Will Farnham, who flew lobsters from Maine down to Miami to serve at his chairman's party in 1984. The ongoing saga of on-premise produced packaged ice led the association to produce Ice, or Is It video. Sanitation efforts were in earnest the latter half of the decade, with hiring of the highly respected sanitarian Charlie Felix as a consultant. But in 1988, the finances of the association had virtually dried up. So after 9 years, they switched from Smith Buckland, an association management company, to Olson Management in Raleigh, North Carolina. The 90s brought the end of the Cold War, and the birth of the internet changed life as everyone knew it. In the 90s, ice plants were introduced to totally automatic packaging rooms. The association was highly focused on sanitation of members' ice products, although all product testing was voluntary. In 1990, Charlie Felix and the Food Safety Committee created the Ice is Food video, which started the Ice is Food campaign. PIA membership in the 90s started a downturn. Some perceptions existed that weren't positive. So in an effort to unite the industry, the first ever Packaged Ice Industry Expo was held in Las Vegas in 1995. Almost 1,500 attended, both non-members and members. Chairman Dennis Menke presided, and in conjunction with Vice Chairman Vinny Abaticola, the event was a huge success. Chairman Wayne Henry presided the following year in 1996 in Vancouver, the first convention ever held in the Canadian city, and only the second in Canada since 1917. Once again, after 8 years, the association was not happy with the performance of their management company and needed a new direction. The executive committee, chaired by Richard Thibault, went searching, and in 1997, Jane McCune was hired as executive director. In 1998 came the new mission statement, the proposed name change to the International Packaged Ice Association, and the birth of PICS, the Packaged Ice Quality Control Standard. The PICS standards to be developed were approved as mandatory for membership, and the association was now officially the International Packaged Ice Association with a new, modern logo. In 1998, the IPA hired sanitation consultant Dr. Neil Webb to assist in developing the PICS program, and then in 1999, the second industry-wide expo was held in Orlando, Florida, with over 900 in attendance, chaired by Roger Pearson. The decade ended on an encouraging note. The third millennium, or 21st century, began with an event that forever changed America, the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2011. The Great Recession began and ended, the DVD replaced the VCR, the connectivity leap of Facebook, and the iPhone and iPad were introduced. The 21st century in the ice industry brought robotics, increasingly sophisticated route management systems, handhelds, and all things corresponding with a dramatic increase in technology in the country. PICS was officially off and running. To complement the new PICS standards, Miss America 1999 Nicole Johnson was hired to promote IPIA member ice, and 2 television commercials were produced the next year with her the featured spokesperson. 2004 and 2005 were the hurricane years, and FEMA had been purchasing massive quantities of packaged ice. IPIA member ice was required, which started fueling the membership growth again, and in 2005. Brent Bonvarley, chairman, with almost 400 attendees, were in Hollywood, Florida to talk about hurricane ice, amongst other issues, and the first strategic planning session that year created the 2005 to 2010 strategic plan. 2005 would also present the new All Ice Should Be This Good logo of the association. 2007 brought the IPA's start into government and public affairs under Chairman Ben Key's chairmanship, culminating with his convention in Washington, D.C. Of course, the association continues to advocate for a standard of identity for all packaged ice manufacturers. Chairman Charlie Priscelli, 2012, Chairman Bob Morse, 2013, Chairman Bo Russell, 2014, Chairman John Smyber, 2015, Chairman Tommy Sedler, 2016, and current Chairman Dan Ades have seen the association through the changing times, FSMA regulations, changing buyer preferences, public affairs programs, social media implementation of Facebook and Twitter, and continued with the guidelines of now third strategic plans, goals, and objectives. The Vice Chairman, A.W. Gordon, at the 50th Golden Anniversary Convention in 1967 stated, "I feel if we rededicate ourselves to our industry, to our National Association, if we adequately fund our National Association, 50 years from now we will have the right to say, again we rejoice and celebrate the 100th year of its organization." So tonight, 50 years later, rejoice IPIA members. You did it. Happy 100th birthday.